Hello, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Vendor Break, Billing for B2B IoT, featuring LogiSense and Numerex. I'm Scott St. John, publisher and managing editor of Pipeline Magazine, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Joining me today is Steve Baker from Numerex, a key service provider who is rising to the challenge of the Internet of Things. Flavio Gomes, founder and CEO of LogiSense, and Ricky Gill, product manager at LogiSense. LogiSense is a key technology provider who is helping service providers like Numerex instill agility throughout their BSS. Today's webinar, we'll be looking at the explosion of devices anticipated to come online in the next few years and dive into a specific case study that illustrates the agility needed to contend with IoT's unique complexity. We are very glad to have both LogiSense and Numerex join us on today's call and discuss this very important topic. Before we begin, you can submit your questions in the Q&A window on the lower left side of your screen. Even if you're viewing this webinar on demand, you can still submit your questions using the Q&A function, and one of our experts will answer your question in the order received. With that, let's jump right in. Our first presenter will be Flavio Gomes, CEO and founder of LogiSense, who will share his insights on how they're helping their customers prepare and capitalize on the Internet of Things. Hello, Flavio.
Hi, thanks everyone for joining. I'd like to take the time to thank you for, out of your busy schedule for joining us today. I'm the founder and CEO of LogiSense, and we'd like to take the opportunity to share a success story about our relationship with Numerex, who's an innovative customer of ours in machine-to-machine or industrial Internet of Things marketplace. And despite a lot of the hype, there's clear and significant momentum driving IoT adoption. While many organizations are in the early stages of evaluating IoT as a revenue driver or efficiency gain within their business, there are others that are far ahead of the adoption curve, delivering IoT services and executing on innovative business models. And in that light, we'd like to share one of those success stories. And LogiSense, together with Numerex, have successfully implemented an Agile BSS platform to address the nuances of IoT business models. And we'd like to share with you some of the highlights of our experience with this deployment. So you'll learn today about the techniques needed to ensure your billing system can provide your organizations with the tools needed to be truly agile. And we'll also discuss how end-to-end billing systems provide better solution scalability through process automation, and why it's important to converge all of your billable services under a single end-to-end platform. And finally, we'll discuss common deployment options for modern billing systems and how those decisions ultimately affect total cost of ownership. But before we get started, I'd like to highlight some IoT trends that will act as a catalyst for our discussion. Depending on what you've read, research analysts are predicting anywhere from 25 billion to 35 billion connected devices in as little as 5 years. And that's quite amazing. In fact, a recent report published by Juniper Research outlines that the total connected device numbers to triple from today's forecast of 12 billion devices to 36 billion devices by 2020. And despite who you believe, it's not a huge stretch of the imagination to conclude that there will be a substantial increase in devices connected to IoT-enabled networks. Equipment manufacturers are taking advantage of low-cost wireless enablement to outfit their products with IoT-ready capabilities. And not to mention analog devices that are being retrofitted with sensors and actuators. And there's an emerging ecosystem of software platforms and devices that are providing the intelligence to manage these networks, with connecting everything from smart meters to manufacturing equipment, and in such industries such as transportation and healthcare, to public services and energy and utilities, just to name a few. So obviously the ramifications of this are huge, and IoT providers will have to determine how their systems will scale to support this growth, and how they will manage billing for customers that have hundreds and even millions of devices under a single account. Their objective should be in providing accurate, reliable, and real-time billing for these connected services, but in a manner that is clear, concise, and complete, if you will. So as you look to roll out your service offering, you will need to ensure you really take the time to examine how you want to monetize through billing and make it a top priority for your business. There are a number of options to potentially the risky and time-consuming building from scratch, or evaluating the many systems out there that claim to provide best-of-breed billing. And we're hoping that our joint and proven deployment experience with Numerex will illustrate one of the ways you can successfully deploy a billing platform that truly monetizes what LogiSense calls the usage economy. So now let's take a look at how prepared IoT providers are to effectively grow their revenues. So market drivers, IoT is still relatively nascent. As we look towards 2020, many organizations today are not really ready to monetize their offering. And according to, I believe it's a recent telecoms.com industry survey, many companies are either on the path or have no idea as to when they'll be prepared. And there are essentially two main barriers businesses are facing. And one is security challenges, and the other a lack of industry standards. Those two issues have been flagged as the biggest inhibitors to the development of mass market IoT. These organizations will really need to ensure their systems are airtight and highly secure when it comes to protecting sensitive customer account and payment information. And without standardization, Internet of Things firms should look to establish established and experienced vendors with proven deployment scenarios from years of scar tissue, essentially solving some of the hardest B2B connectivity and end-to-end billing problems. Moving on to market drivers in the BSS in the cloud. Finally, when it comes down to sort of total cost of ownership, we want to talk about the different deployment options and specifically the implications of deploying BSS in the cloud. As Informa Telecoms has shown, many providers are looking to deploy BSS solutions in the cloud to lower their spending profile, get to market quicker while never having to worry about managing the upgrade process as new features are being rolled out. And while true public cloud offerings may be able to reduce the initial time to market and capture ROI quicker, we need to be mindful of the fact that IoT models will change all the time, and new features, products, services, and bundles need to be configured and deployed with greater velocity. But before we continue, I'd like to introduce LogiSense to those who may not know us. So what we really do is empower the enterprise to monetize the usage economy. And today's usage economy is a highly complex environment with a matrix ecosystem of end users and providers generating transactions that require metering, measurement, and monetization. LogiSense provides our customers with complete agility and flexibility in real-time usage rating, monetization, and subscriber management for essentially every conceivable digital transaction, from any service or subscription and over any medium from any provider. Our award-winning Engage IP billing platform empowers clients to take control of their service offerings, and we enable them to proactively perform with agility and accuracy, allowing them to remain relevant and vital in a time when the end user is really dictating usage. Our mission is to monetize the usage economy, and our vision is to lead the charge to revolutionize the way the companies do business by converting cost centers into revenue-generating units. And with that, I'll hand this over to Steve Baker from Numerex.
Thank you, Flavio. And as Flavio said, there's been a tremendous change over time, and Numerex has actually been there for the vast majority of it. We actually began well over 2 decades ago in what was called telematics at the time, and broke out from Bell South and have evolved through machine-to-machine and what is now called Internet of Things. We have quite a few commercial customers from a vertical standpoint. We have a large contingent of network services customers and VAR accounts. And of course, we have a fairly robust device fulfillment and design business behind our behind our activities of the market. And with the full 2 decades plus, we've come to understand that there's just a tremendous amount of variation and, for lack of a better term, a need for speed in being able to bring that variation to market. So moving forward, we've been working with LogiSense for the last year or so, and we have, I think you'll find in this particular webinar that we've discovered a true mechanism for implementing that agility to market. So for key considerations, we spent obviously a fair amount of time evaluating the market and looking at what systems are out there that could handle what we needed to do to provide billing in this environment. And one of the things that really resonates with customers, or is the biggest feedback I get, is with the variations between prepaid, postpaid, various rounding mechanisms, pay-per-use, pooling. It's really difficult, especially when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of subscribers and multiple rate plans and service types, to make a clear and concise invoice for the customer. And that's probably our #1 driver. But also in the course of doing that, it's important for us to be able to automate the management and life cycle of these services. In doing that, we look very hard at being able to interconnect as many of our systems through various interfaces, things such as Salesforce, Boomi interfaces to our accounting systems, and drive through the full automation of that life cycle, so we're not having to manually process quick turnaround on new sales opportunities. And we also were looking for a vendor who could provide us with both a rapid enhancement ecosystem, one where we may benefit from other enhancements being provided by the vendor, but as well as be able to enhance the system ourselves. So an open system was very important to us. And of course, as Flavio has mentioned several times, being able to accelerate our path to new business models, very key for us, because it moves fast and there's no telling what the next IoT vertical application is going to be. There's no limit to it, which makes this environment very exciting to work in. At this point, I'll hand it back to you, Flavio.
Thanks, Steve. I think we'll have Ricky Gill now carry us forward with some of the elements of the deployment. Ricky?
Yep. Thanks, Flavio, and thanks, Steve, for outlining some of the key drivers from Numerex's perspective on IoT billing. So now let's spend a few minutes exploring how some of those key business drivers and problems map into the actual requirements that billing needs to fulfill. So the first thing that we want to look at is agile pricing. And sort of as Flavio and Steve have alluded to, IoT is really all about introducing new and unique business models, whether it's costs for connectivity that are to be charged to the customer on a recurring basis, built into the cost of the device, free for a few months, charged based on cumulative usage, or subsidized by the network, et cetera, et cetera. Agile pricing effectively means being able to quickly configure, test, and implement a new service offering in a matter of days. Now, this is essentially a basic requirement, but what is it that you have to do when the model doesn't exist in your existing product catalog? You also need to ensure that your solution provider effectively has it in them to quickly introduce new product changes in a timely manner. So when you're looking at billing partners, this is essentially a key non-functional requirement that requires attention. After agile pricing, we kind of move into the area of sales enablement. So your pricing strategy essentially is meaningless if your systems can't handle the personalized pricing needs and sensitivities of the end customer. And we'll explore that in greater detail. Core billing itself covers connectivity level and service level billing needs. Your models need to effectively be able to support dynamic pricing for wholesale data and SMS to cover your transport charges from the carrier, and at the same time be able to support models that monetize at the service level so you can capture revenue based on the intrinsic value of the services that are being delivered. Obviously, analytics and reporting are necessary requirements, but in order for this to really work, you need to be able to combine raw information from multiple systems in your architecture to extract the most value out of the data. From a billing perspective, you need to make sure your vendor can integrate. Automation means providing end-to-end solutions to help provide the lowest possible total cost of ownership while increasing customer satisfaction and profits. Modern billing systems today don't just rate, invoice, tax. Since billing is central to how your organization makes money, it needs to be integrated into the entire value chain in order for your solutions to scale. And where you scale is the deployment challenge. So Flavio has outlined some of the approaches, and we're definitely seeing a big push towards lower cost, hosted, and managed services. But before we get there, let's dig into the details behind Agile pricing. So Agile pricing requirements are tied typically to the needs of your organization's marketing persona. At LogiSense, we've seen for some time now more and more proposals for modern billing systems being sponsored by an organization's CMO department. It's one of the reasons why you'll hear the term revenue management over billing more often than not these days. And in order for marketing to really effectively achieve their revenue management goals, the billing system at the end of the day needs to provide a simple-to-use configuration-based catalog. Many IoT firms won't have the resources to fully dedicate staff towards ongoing system administration on a day-to-day basis. And you combine that with cloud-based BSS options, and in many cases, it's marketing who directly manages the catalog on the system itself. And when we talked about models, you need to be able to combine both subscription and usage-based models based on how you value your application. An extension to usage-based modeling is the concept of real-time rating. So real-time rating effectively allows you to create additional plans that take into account more contextual information related to both the end customer and the transaction itself. For example, if your client requires roaming services, additional products can be created to allow your organization to monetize based on location. There are also legacy models like time-of-day-based rating that can be used to vary the amount charged based on when a particular transaction was generated. We know that carriers are considering time-of-day-based rating to help sort of offset the burden of their mobile networks, which are going to be constrained by the 36 billion odd device connections on networks that were essentially originally designed for the purposes of handling only consumer traffic. So it is something that may need to be passed on. Typically, there are other tools that marketing teams want to leverage in their pricing strategy. Segmentation is very important. So pricing varies based on the market. So you need to be able to package and position uniquely to your target markets. So for the same product, you should be able to charge less to buyers only willing to pay less and charge more to buyers willing to pay more. You've got to make it reasonable to support different pricing structures. As an example, we can just take a look at airline reservation systems. They've been segmenting pricing based on location and by tracking cookies on your browser for a very long time now. Also, when combining subscription and usage-based models, marketing needs to be able to define tiered pricing models, typically 3 price points. 3 options help a buyer make a decision more quickly. So you want to kind of split it up into your good, better, and best type tiered scenarios. We usually hate the anomalies of discounting, but it's part of the process. Discounting is about making price-sensitive clients feel good, so we have to respect that part of the process. And as you move from good to best tiered packages, those packages need to come with additional services and more pooled or individual usage quota limits. We've also got experimentation through trial periods and terms. These can be a detriment to closing a deal unless the terms aren't set correctly. So if you're going to do it, make sure it's segmented. Make sure you get some metrics on conversion rates. If the win rate goes down, you stop the program. And if the win rate goes up, it's acceptable to roll it up. Okay? And lastly, you want to be able to support price changes. The hardest thing to do in the IoT space is price something that nobody has ever seen. As an example, when the iPhone first entered the market, its entry price was set at around $600. The market didn't like it, and Apple had to drop the price 30 days later. So as the market changes, the price will need to change in kind. And then lastly, when in considering some of the sensitivities of the end customer, we need to be able to notify the end customer in real time of their usage and current spend so they don't get bill shocked when they receive their bill. Bill presentment needs to be simple and easy to understand. When an account has thousands of devices associated with it, make sure you capture summary level charges and leverage web-based customer self-service for the customer to dig into the details and lessen the burden on your support staff. So those are some of the requirements that we've been uncovering. Steve, I'll kick a question to you. For Numerex, can you actually describe some of the agile pricing challenges you were facing with your legacy solution, and how did LogiSense help you achieve your company's agile pricing needs?
Absolutely. Obviously one of the big elements in our IoT offerings becomes various either prepaid or term agreements. And we had, in our previous system, we had a lot of challenges making specific changes for various terms wrapped around either device subsidization or application offerings or service offerings that were wrapped around similar terms we were getting from different carriers. As you know, in our system, we offer a number of different network services, and we bundle device with that. So being able to both subsidize and wrap a term around those in various mechanisms, depending on the customer's logistics concerns, became a great burden to us in our old system, and we were able to actually turn that around rather quickly in the Engage IP system from LogiSense. So it's truly benefited us to be able to go out and define business terms, which in IoT is really a key aspect, is the fact that 9 times out of 10 it's the logistics concern of moving devices through, say, an Asia-Pac vendor, moving them into production and release, and being able to set both the start period of the billing as well as the term around that, and do that in flexible mechanisms depending on what case that particular customer has. So we really truly benefit from the agility of that system, of the system that we've gone to now.
Great, thanks, Steve. So in the previous slide, we focused in on the marketing persona and their requirements for agile pricing. Another section in proposals that we've been seeing more and more recently is integrating sales with billing and revenue management. So in the business-to-business landscape, systems need to support personalized deal. And why is that? Well, more often than not, it's because the end customer is always painting the picture of being price sensitive. When sales operations is effectively integrated into billing, it really needs to be nimble enough to support customizations on a personalized quote and allowing an order to be created out of it, all while not having to actually go into the billing system to change the product catalog on a case-by-case basis. There are many sales automation systems in the market today that sort of allow for custom quoting and the creation of internal approval processes to facilitate the closing of a deal. Now, once that deal is closed, an integration path can be established between sales and billing. And that integration needs to work in a seamless manner such that no manual intervention is effectively required to onboard the end customer's account with a personalized quote. So effectively, it should be okay to process an order, whatever it may be, so long as a business decision to accept it has been made. And then that kind of ties into the way you sort of reward and commission your VARs and your dealers. You shouldn't have to manage commissions through an Excel sheet. In the IoT space, especially with startup companies kind of sprouting out of the woodwork every day, and many of these companies are going to rely on value-added resellers to expand their point of distribution. And as part of the approval process, when acquiring customer logos, sort of at the expense of acceptable margins that were set out by marketing in the initial catalog, you want to make sure that the billing system can dynamically adjust commissions payable to sort of support the deal, but doing so in a way that could potentially help offset that marginal loss. If the billing system can track this information, it can also be used for reporting purposes, so you can easily benchmark the performance of your sales teams, and even look to potentially discount or discourage discounting with evidence. Now, Steve, coming back to Numerex, you did mention earlier on sort of Salesforce. What does having sales directly integrated into billing mean to your company operationally?
Well, absolutely. So it gives us a chance to do a couple of things. It gives us a nice flow through from new opportunities that flow through our order entry as well as right through to our billing and eventually our final accounting platforms. And that flow through obviously streamlines quite a bit of what we do daily. And, you know, I think back to the previous question you asked me and how it kind of relates to this sales integration, but, you know, we kind of go by the 80-20 rule here, where we can hit about 80% of the market with a standard product offering. But you can look at scale in two ways. There's scale in the number of customers you have, but then there could be scale, as we've talked about, in the fact that you have customers that scale up to hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And invariably, that's our 20% rule, which suggests that our sales folks need to be able to go out and have flexible terms we may not have built into our flow-through system. And what we had to have was a way to be able to quickly turn around the support of those deals. That's sort of the fun thing about IoT, is we just don't know what's going to walk in the door next. So we certainly go at it with our 80% of our solution, but invariably there's usually some element of specific or configurable nature that we have to introduce from a consultative or business sales standpoint that we need to be able to take into our CRM and route all the way through to our final, well, it ends with invoicing, which is what it boils down to. So we have to be able to have that flexibility to go out to market and address those high volume customers.
That's great. Thanks, Steve. So now that we've covered off sort of the needs of sales and marketing, let's talk a little bit about how to actually put the solution together. So for LogiSense, our flagship Engage IP product essentially is a platform solution for service delivery in up and downstream markets within the overall M2M IoT taxonomy. If you recall earlier, Flavio had highlighted that standardization is effectively one of the key barriers to entry for IoT. Standardization is something that's needed across all elements in the value chain. This is what is going to ultimately reduce costs for deployment and speed up adaptation. As an example, we know that the European Telecommunication Standards Institute, their One M2M consortium, is looking at specifying integration, direct integration protocols into billing systems from things like an M2M server. So one of our goals is to help IoT solution providers become independent enablers with end-to-end solution capability. If we look at the blocks from the left, from the top down of the stack, we start with distribution. Most, if not all, of our customers require hooks from their web self-service so that customers can log in and view their bills, make a payment, purchase additional products and services, and ultimately get a better detailed view of their usage so that they can better understand their bill. They also want to be able to see historical usage charted out in an intuitive manner and basically figure out how their spend profile is trending. And you want to do this effectively to remove the burden on your customer service representatives who would be typically resolving these types of questions through complaint calls. Figures have shown that a typical complaint call will garner about anywhere between $5 to $10 in operational expenditure per call. So if you can avoid this, you avoid eroding sort of the average revenue per unit on a subscription, which in the M2M and IoT landscape is fairly low per unit to begin with. So distribution helps protect your margins on a recurring basis, and it also helps grow your bottom line if you can provide sort of white label reseller portals that are pre-integrated with billing, kind of analogous to Salesforce automation, so that dealers can easily quote off of your product catalog, see their commissions, and automate the onboarding of new clients and renewals into the system. Basically, integration of a VAR system into billing allows your dealers to spend as much time as possible focusing on winning new business on your behalf, as opposed to having to interface with your company's billing department to process Excel sheet orders or correct manual errors. Below distribution, we've got service management. Service management effectively requires or it represents the upstream opportunity whereby the core proposition goes beyond basic connectivity, which is relatively low ARPU, and focuses again on the intrinsic value of the service being delivered. Now, that service management requires collaboration with a new ecosystem, which includes app developers, device hardware manufacturers, mobile network operators, and system integrators. And the only way in which this collaboration can effectively be achieved is through automation. As Steve mentioned earlier, your billing system needs to have the flexibility to integrate into common ERP and CRM systems from a customer care and financial perspective. But let's not discount or forget about the devices and the network. It's equally important from our perspective to be able to have that same level of flexibility when provisioning the service, be it on demand or in bulk. In some devices, we've seen such as anti-theft modules in cars, utility meters, personal tracking devices, or security modules. The SIM card essentially needs to be inserted in the machine and hermetically sealed during the manufacturing process. So you need to have an ability to remotely provision the SIM card over the air once the service provider has selected or changed their network partner. And these are some of the initiatives that are being supported by the GSMA Alliance in relation to activities related to embedded SIM and over-the-air activations. So really, if we're going to look at sort of how we support automation, we're going to talk about basically being able to take transactions from a dealer, send it through service management layers, and push those transactions all the way down to the device. This right side of the equation effectively represents the lowest possible path to reducing your overall operational expenditures. And then the left side represents the revenue optimization problem, whereby the usage is garnered from the network, pulled up through billing, tied to a subscription, and leads up to self-care systems, all of which comes together to promote full automation, optimization, and simplification of your platform. But don't take my word for it. Steve, how has LogiSense helped improve operations at Numerex architecturally?
Oh, absolutely. It's so just a quick note on kind of why we brought sort of what I would think is a sort of a unique perspective to the exercise. But we've got a modular IoT platform, and so from a different perspective, we actually represent quite a few different models that we support today, and we needed to have that system that could support them as well. So obviously devices are a major business for us, but we've got a number of different types of networks, and I know people that have worked with networks in the past. There's no end to the different types of rounding mechanisms and billing models that we have to support and either pass through to our customers or aggregate within ourselves. We sell content-level services, and of course we have our own vertical applications. And the interesting thing is we sell these in mixed in a mixed set of combinations. So we might be selling 2 out of 3, 2 out of 4 of these, or 1 out of 4 of these, or all 4 of these together. So we were bringing a very wide set of requirements across the spectrum, and we really had to have something that would allow us to provide a mediated input and do rating at a very precise way, as well as provide us with some added benefits such as reconciliation against our carrier services bills and analytics, so we can analyze what we were spending per account and try to look at ways to monetize that. From operationally, though, we've experienced a great benefit in the fact that we're now able to consolidate these things, potentially tie in our CRM, and move this through our system in a far more automated way, such as beginning with account creation, all the way through subscription lifecycle and and management. And I'll comment one note on eSIM, which is a particularly interesting subject. It's really important in the sense that when I've spoken with the carriers about putting the service in, which we're looking at very carefully, that the provisioning and billing aspects are probably the key attribute that is the most complicated in putting that out there. IoT is a perfect environment for looking at things like eSIM. It's definitely something that we're very highly focused on. But all in all, we've been able to pull this model in and realize it through LogiSense, and it's really been a great benefit for us.
Great, thanks for that, Steve. So the last topic we wanted to discuss with you today has to do with deployment. So as we mentioned earlier, automated systems with end-to-end capability help lower your operational expenditures. Well, when it comes to the cloud, we're not talking about the other side of the cost equation, and that is capital expenditures. When you're looking at sort of your deployment options today, there really are three options to consider when it comes to deploying your end-to-end billing systems. We've got the traditional on-premise solutions, which are effectively pure CapEx solutions where all of the IT systems and physical servers are managed on the operator's premises. We've also got hosted managed services, whereby services such as billing offered by the vendor are hosted. So all the physical services that run that service are hosted somewhere else by that vendor. And access to the service is typically provided through a direct network connection, be it the internet or otherwise. And this approach effectively shifts the spending model away from CapEx and fully towards OpEx. The third option we're looking at is true cloud. And cloud services are effectively similar to hosted solutions in that a cloud service is also a hosted service that's essentially accessible over the internet. A true cloud configuration is typically set up in a multi-tenant manner where all of the users share the same underlying infrastructure. Hosted solutions are typically single tenant and specific to the capabilities of the vendor, whereas true cloud offerings tend to promote a little bit more of a collaborative environment between different vendors. Ultimately, the choice that you're going to make is going to be dependent on your business and your use case. But one thing is certain, most CIOs today would prefer to have an OpEx model, but one that promotes the least risk to the organization as well. Your CIO doesn't want to have to maintain the extra hardware to have to deal with peak hour and unexpected bursts in traffic that will become an issue with these 36 billion connections making their way into the market by 2020. Cloud and hosted solutions effectively allow the operator to take advantage of bursts in traffic with additional resources on a pay-per-use basis so that you can ensure that your customer demand is supported without requiring all of the extra capital risk. One of the things that we've been finding then is between hosted and true cloud offerings, a lot of CIOs in this space are a little bit more receptive to hosted solutions, even though they both reside outside of their premises. Hosted solutions tend to provide the CIO with a little bit more sense of control over their systems. With a hosted solution, you'll still get most of the assurances in terms of SLA compliance that you would get out of an on-premise solution. An on-premise solution usually comes with 5 to 6 nines of high availability, whereas cloud solutions typically only provide 3 nines. Also, because true cloud offerings are typically multi-tenant, it makes it a little bit harder to get the functionality you need into the system. So we've been talking all along about how yesterday's models and capabilities aren't necessarily today's reality in IoT. In order to differentiate, to create value, and ultimately win in this space, you need to be able to incorporate your product changes quickly. And even though true cloud offerings come with a lot of built-in capability, depending on the complexity of the ask, you may not get it in time, or you may not get it at all because the impact of your changes may just be a little bit too difficult to incorporate in a shared environment. But definitely at the end of the day, the choice needs to be made between a hosted and true cloud offering. Steve, do you want to highlight some of the key decision criteria and analysis that Numerex went through when selecting your deployment model of choice?
Absolutely. Obviously, we've talked about the flexibility to put new services out there. It really boils down to the fact that we do have our own billing staff here, and they're very quick and they're very good at what they do. But I also I needed to be able to leverage my billing vendor to also quickly turn around new features, and we're talking 7 to 10 days, including QA. So we needed to be able to do both of those functions. That was a key element for us, was either the extensibility by our groups or being able to leverage our vendor to create that extensibility in a very quick manner. We needed someone or a system that could, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, support a number of models. We mix and match our component solutions, and of course they are all built differently. So and part of that is making sure both that we can cover those models, but offer an invoice that is easy to read and concise and clear. It's micro usage is what we're billing for, and we absolutely had to have at least a daily rating mechanism so that we could process in real time, or as close to real time as we can, our UDRs in a sense, so that we didn't run into a 3 or 4 day rating and billing function at the end of a cycle and get the invoices out quickly. The quicker we get them out, the quicker we get our money back. We had to have API access, a robust set of API access, and the ability to tie into CRM tools, not necessarily that we're building, but a vendor was going to build with us, and be able to interconnect systems that we simply aren't going to outsource or rebuild, elements of our OSS and BSS, if you will. And lastly, we had to have the option to have, as Ricky had mentioned in the previous chart, we had to have the ability to do both hosted as well as on-premise, and we needed the ability to migrate that depending on what situation we're in, if we felt one way was better than the other. So we needed a vendor that would provide all of these, all this flexibility to come to the table.
Sounds good, Steve. Perfect. So let's just quickly wrap up. So in today's session, we've talked a little bit about sort of how IoT firms can effectively, through end-to-end billing systems, really support both the marketing needs in terms of agile pricing to reduce your overall time to revenue, how to fully enable sales or effectively enable sales to customize marketing products to meet the needs of the end customer, providing end-to-end systems that need to be aware of the entire taxonomy in order to scale, ensuring billing systems provide invoices for thousands of devices on an account in a clear, concise, and transparent manner, and essentially finding the right deployment model that fits your needs. So what we'd like to do is just, on behalf of Steve, Flavio, and myself, we'd like to thank you for joining us today, and would love to take the time now to answer some of your questions.
Thanks, and thanks to our presenters, Ricky, Flavio, and Steve, for sharing your insights on IoT and the agility needed to contend with this important trend. We have received some great questions from the audience, so please keep sending them in by submitting them through the Q&A panel on your screen. The first question, Steve, I'd pose to you. What do you see the difference between M2M and IoT to be, or how is M2M being applied to IoT for new opportunities?
That is a great question. I think M2M started out as a very targeted and very technical market to solve specific problems. And I think where it evolved somewhat is when the concept of IoT came out. It certainly broadened the concept of M2N on two ends. M2M had originally been about connecting remote devices via cellular or satellite for typically very low usage monitoring type applications and in some instances control applications. With the advent and evolution to IoT, apart from being largely IP based, the nature of how the devices are connected broadened quite a bit to include anything that got the device onto the internet. So it could be Wi-Fi, it could be Bluetooth through a Wi-Fi gateway, it could be Zigbee through a Wi-Fi gateway or a cellular gateway. So that part broadened out and generally became ubiquitous. It's not important how the data got on the network. What's important is that the data got on the network, and the most ubiquitous being the internet. On the top side, rather than focusing on very targeted applications, I believe that the content is becoming and has become far more important, especially the value of what the content is providing. And not only that, the market has expanded, whereas what was machine-to-machine is sometimes now a wearable device, so somewhat consumer-based, also to a machine that would provide greater visibility through things like big data and analytics. So looking at M2M, it is the basis or foundation from where IoT evolved, but IoT, I think, has expanded the market a great deal to introduce solutions that at once weren't thought possible.
Thanks, Steve. That actually raises another good question. And how do you prepare for the unknown? If IoT is kind of continually evolving to address these new devices and the various types of data and content that's coming online, as an operator, how do you contend with that rate of change?
Great question. The nature, and I'll go back to some of our decision making for the Engage IP platform. It was defined and exists as much like an object-oriented solution. And in that sense, we are able to, while we're solving problems, we're able to build out components or tools, services, if you will, to build up the rate plans that we need. And each variation became another component that we could reuse for the future. So I would say, in short, we built for reuse rather than specific targets. And through reuse, we are able to combine various aspects or tools or components quickly to create new models. And that's a key value for us, to get out quickly on the very variable nature of this particular market.
Great answer. When you're thinking about reuse of technology so that you can accelerate deployment, I mean, I think that's a key factor. So I'll turn the next question over to Flavio and Ricky, and looking at agility as you know, really the underlying method for that reuse and delivery. How do you ensure agility throughout the BSS for customers like Numerex?
That's a great question, Scott. So for us, our focus is really on making sure that we provide all of our partners with sort of the tools that they need to kind of roll out solutions in an end-to-end manner. So whether that's starting from sales operations, customer care, going down the stack through to billing, rating, and ultimately down to the heart of the network. So what we do is we like to go to market with essentially an out-of-the-box solution that can support the entire value chain. But at the same time, we do recognize the reality that certain clients have already got components within the BSS stack already in place, and then they'd like to continue to sort of leverage those assets for various reasons, whether it has to do with efficiency, project timelines, expertise, or just overall scalability. So we have, and we continue to support customers that are also looking sort of for this type of multi-vendor solution configuration by making sure that sort of all of our core components are modular enough and can be integrated with open and flexible APIs through best practices. As an example, we do quite often run into situations where a client has got sort of incumbent systems in place that are really lacking core, almost rating capability that's needed to support some of the complex pooling type requirements for the thousands of devices that we're seeing in the M2M space. So, you know, while it's not a straightforward task to do it, doing sort of a multi-vendor point-to-point type integration, it's something that we've been able to sort of standardize across all of our customer base and kind of extending on Steve's point of reusability as well.
Thanks for that. So the flip side of that question then I guess would go to Steve, and how important or how do you see the trend towards interoperability and open standards being a factor in your decision in terms of the solutions and architecture you put in place at Numerex?
Obviously, they're very important pieces to any solution in its extensibility. I would probably put more emphasis on the idea of interaction with existing tools, and one comes to mind almost immediately, which is marrying any CRM. Obviously, there are some very large ones out there today that most people use, but bringing your CRM in as close a contact and interaction with your rating and billing truly makes a system which is easy to manage and as flow-through, i.e. reducing manual processes as you can possibly get. So I'd say I put most emphasis in that category. Certainly open standards are important, but in the end, there's always usually some type of variation that has to be encountered due to the uniqueness of a business. Otherwise, the business may not be nearly as unique. So it gets you most of the way there, back to the 80-20 rule. And sort of, you get 80% of it is open source, 20% is what makes you who you are.
Yeah, excellent point. Thanks for that. Another question from the audience here. How do you solve the problems related to device provisioning? I think it's in relation to billing balances. If the balance gets negative, do you switch off the device?
Well, that's an interesting question. I actually had this come up yesterday with a customer as well. And the question becomes, what is the device doing? If that device is monitoring a heart, it's probably not a great idea to turn it off. So it really becomes a business, right? So it becomes a business decision. The critical nature, I mean, it's very common in maybe not an enterprise, but in a consumer world. Someone who's not paying or fails to pass credit check, well, certainly suspending that service is maybe not life-threatening or life-critical. On the flip side with IoT, you would have to make that decision as part of the business case, and that business case would have to be implemented within your system. So it's absolutely important to identify the results and, frankly, the liability involved with actually taking an automated action such as that. There is absolutely room to do it. It's absolutely possible, but it's certainly something that has to be taken in perspective of what the actual solution is providing.
Now, is that something you'd ever trust to policy and automation, or is that something you think there has to be manual intervention and evaluation, to review what the actual device is doing on the network, or what the device actually is?
Yeah, there's no doubt that it can be automated, but I think our preference is to inject some manual interaction at the relationship level, at a business level, which I think is that alone may not scale in a consumer market, but in a B2B business, a B2B market, that is we think paramount to maintain those relationships, to be able to manage that end of the business. Can be automated, but I think in a large part, most people prefer to have that be a human interaction before a particular suspend action takes place.
Yeah, it makes sense. With the emphasis on customer experience and customer experience management, having that personal relationship and leveraging that before a suspension action takes place will strengthen the relationship with the customer. Next question here is regarding something Ricky said earlier. Products and pricing are being driven more and more by the CMO office. I guess I would ask both you and Ricky, Steve and Ricky, to answer this one. How important is it now to be a marketing-led organization, and do you see that being the trend moving forward?
Yeah,
Ricky,
absolutely.
I'll let you go first there.
Yeah, no problem. So one of the things that we've been noticing is sort of when you look at billing systems, modern billing systems at least, it's not so much about using these centralized platforms as just your invoicing platform anymore. It's really about how these systems that are sort of central to the business can be used to grow your revenues. So anytime you're talking about growing your revenues, really you're speaking directly to the persona of the marketing individual who essentially is responsible for the P&L within an organization.
And Flavio here, I'd just like to add, we're also seeing that it's being levered as a differentiator in the marketplace by being able to provide more granular pricing mechanisms and response mechanisms to customer trending and usage trending. We're seeing our organizations and customers that are using our platform really offering a differentiated service level agreement to their customers.
Steve, anything to add to that?
Just briefly, the trending, I look as similar to the model of crowdsourcing, but on a machine level. And I think the trending and the usage profiles are important and will continue to become more important over time, as long as usage is the billable component. And so yes, I think it is and will continue to grow as a major piece to this market.
Great, thanks for that. So I think that's all the questions we have time for today. It looks like we're running pretty low. So I want to thank our presenters again from both LogiSense and Numerix. And thank all of our attendees for attending today's webinar. Just before we wrap up, we are going to announce the winner of the Apple or Android watch that is part of the giveaway for today's webinar. And today's winner is Adrian of Allstream. We will notify you by email just to protect the innocent, but we will send all that information, so look out for that, and congratulations on that. Once again, thanks again to all of our presenters for attending this, or for presenting on this webinar today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.